Nike created the first running super shoe and iterations have been worn to break countless records since, but which one is the best? Stay tuned to find out. I'm going to run a 1K time trial in 4 of Nike's iconic super shoes, the Vaporfly 2, Vaporfly 3, Alphafly 2 and Alphafly 3 to see which is the fastest for me, flat out, over 1 kilometre. Now, I know this isn't the most scientific of tests, please don't be mean to me because the Running Channel team are already being mean enough by making me do it. It's absolutely freezing, so let's get stuck in. Quick bit of context, the first edition of the Nike Super Shoes was the Vaporfly Elite, later released to the public as the Vaporfly 4%. The prototype of them was worn in a hidden launch at the US Olympic Trials in 2016, the Olympic Trials for the marathon, where they were disguised as the Zoom Streak 6. Then they were finally released to the public in 2017 by Eliud Kipchoge. Day 1, shoe 1, and it's Nike's Vaporfly 2. Now, if you're going to change a shoe that everybody loves, then you have to make sure you do it right. And did Nike get it right? Did they make it faster? Well, let's put it to the test. Now, these are the second version, and to this point, I've been one of my favourite super shoes because they're reliably fast, and they are one of the first shoes I ever put on that just felt absolutely bonkers compared to a normal running shoe. Now, we're retesting these along with the Vaporfly 3 because since the previous test, I've done a whole block of marathon training, which might have made me a little bit fitter, but it potentially has made me a little bit slower. So we need a fair comparison between these and the Alphafly 2 and 3. We're running exactly the same stretch of road in each shoe on different days, so hopefully that makes it as fair as it possibly can. Now, the Vaporflys feel like a super shoe compared to a normal everyday running shoe. And then the Alphaflys are another step up again because they feel even more bonkers. Now, these Vaporflys, I would say, help me most when I'm running fast, say 5 or 10K. Much further than that, and they do feel a little bit unstable for me. But running a 1K time trial, they're almost perfect for because at that pace, my mechanics are nice and efficient. I'm not rocking and rolling through my ankles too much, which means my knees and my hips are nice and stable. I actually preferred the upper from the first version. This second version I find more difficult to lock my foot in, but that's not what a lot of other people have said, so perhaps that's horses for courses. But out on the road, they feel nice and smooth through the transition. They give me a decent amount of energy return, and even as I'm starting to fatigue in this kilometre, I can still feel a decent amount of energy return, that roll through and that rocking motion that's propelling me forwards and stopping me from really dropping off my pace as I start to get tired. The shoe's really popular because straight out of the box, it feels really comfortable and most importantly, really fast. And that's how they feel for me today. But will the time stack up against the other shoes? It's definitely harder doing this in the winter, or it feels harder. Last time we did it was in the summer. The time before that was in Lanzarote, one with the training, so I'm glad to get the first one done. I'm really excited to see how the other shoes, particularly the Alphaflys, compare to these, what I consider to essentially be the OGs, the Vaporfly 2. Day 2, shoe 2, and next up we've got Nike's Vaporfly 3. Now, I tested this before and I wasn't the biggest fan because there's a massive shift here from the 2 to the 3. A change in foam, a change in the way it feels, potentially a shift towards longer distances like the marathon, which didn't fare that well in my last 1K time trial, but I am really keen to see how it stacks up in my current fitness as part of the full Nike Super Shoe range, so I'm going to give it my best. So there is a caveat to the test here. These are definitely the shoes out of the 4 that fit me the least well. So I have to cinch the laces in a little bit because they're quite wide and quite deep in the toe box. So I do struggle to get a nice secure fit here. But then immediately on starting to run, they feel faster than a normal training shoe, but definitely not as fast as the other shoes in Nike's range. That transition from midfoot strike through to the toe off, which is usually so propulsive in a super shoe, just isn't there for me in this. I have to work really hard to generate the power in these shoes. The foam feels softer and possibly slightly more stable than the Vaporfly 2, but with that increased stability and softness is a lack of speed for me. There's no real pop in these shoes. As I was running, I could just feel myself getting more and more fatigued trying to generate the same sort of pace that I've been running in the Vaporfly 2 and just not really being able to sustain it. I felt much more tired, much more quickly in this kilometre effort. Then as it came to the business end of this K, the last few hundred metres, the last 30 to 40 seconds, when I could feel my ankles, knees, hips not being as stable and efficient as I would like them to be, I just wasn't getting very much back from the shoe and I could feel my pace fading towards the end of this K effort. And by the time I finished, I was exhausted. I wouldn't say my verdict on these shoes has changed massively. Out of the 4, my expectations are that these are the slowest. Definitely feel like they give me the least back and I have to put in the most effort. And the super shoe definition is that they're giving you a little bit extra power and propulsion. So onto the Alphaflys. Day 3, and today it's Nike's Alphafly 2 that I'm putting to the test. And back in 2022, this set the men's marathon world record of 2:01:09 in Berlin. So let's find out how it fares in our test today. Okay, time to get going. The The moment that I put these on, they felt noticeably different, particularly doing a little jog just to get a feel for them. I'd forgotten what they feel like, and they don't feel great for me running slowly. I know they're not designed for jogging, but that's really worth bearing in mind. As soon as I started doing a faster stride in them, I could feel the energy that they were giving me, that real bounce. And compared to the Vaporflys, they fit much more snugly around my arch of my foot, which actually, despite feeling essentially like you're on stilts or trampolines, feels like it fits a lot more securely around my midfoot. So as I was getting going inside this first minute, I really felt the bounce that I was being given from them. It's noticeably different to the two Vaporfly shoes. Much more of a kind of roll through into the transition. Then those pods under the forefoot do feel a little bit stiffer, but then perhaps like they give you a little bit more ping is the only word that I could use for it. As I get in towards the middle and then towards the end of this kilometre effort, I was getting tired. It's really cold, but as I would expect my legs to fatigue, and I'm looking at my split time to see whether they're slowing down, actually, the shoes feel like they're doing a really good job of keeping me going and giving me energy when I need it, when I'm starting to get tired. And I managed to stay strong until the very end. And I was surprised at how fast they felt, given how wallowy they felt initially on putting them on. These shoes are popular in the marathon. I've seen them everywhere on marathoners' feet, so I didn't really expect them to be very good over a 1K time trial, but I've been pleasantly surprised that despite their initial feeling out of the box, just how fast they feel running at this kind of pace. So much harder doing these in the cold, but it's like running on trampolines. They're so bouncy. And the energy return in the last 30 seconds when I was starting to get tired is amazing. Like, really felt like they kept me going. I'm really interested to see whether the threes can be better than that. Day 4, the fourth pair of shoes and the ones that I'm the most excited about. These are the Alphafly 3s. So these are the record-setting shoes from Kiptum's most recent world record in Chicago, as well as the ones that Sifan Hassan wore on her marathon debut where she won at the London Marathon. They're also the most extensively tested pair of Alphaflys ever, including on the most extensive number of female athletes. So does that translate into speed? Let's find out. The moment that I put these on, they felt like a fundamentally different shoe to the Alphafly 2. Not just a small iteration, but a complete overhaul, a complete change. And one that on putting them on and walking around was actually a little bit scary because the heel almost throws you backwards a little bit. Definitely doesn't feel like it's going to immediately propel you forwards when you're running. But I just had to hope that once I started running fast and my all-out pace, that they would come into their own. Essentially, my all-out pace being pretty close to what Kiptum manages to run for an entire marathon. There are redesigned laces to make it softer on the top of the foot. I definitely noticed that. They're slightly wider. A bad thing for me because I've got very narrow feet, but I did feel like the Alphafly 2s were pretty narrow. There's an Atom Knit 3.0 upper, molded sock liner, and a full-length carbon plate. Now, when I started running, I immediately did feel that wow factor of, oh my goodness, this is something special, because in the first 200 meters, I looked down at the pace on my watch and realized I hadn't seen those kind of figures on my watch for 5 or 6 years, almost since retiring. So maybe that was partly my excitement, so psychosomatic, because I wanted these shoes to be fast. But the proof was going to be whether I could keep that going. They felt more stable overall and a little bit less slappy than the Alphafly 2, and you could hear that in the noise that they make, which is definitely slightly quieter. None of these super shoes are quiet though. They definitely felt smoother than the Alphafly 2s because the pods at the front of the Alphafly 2s are really noticeable in that transition. And then as I came into the second half of this kilometre, having still looked down at my watch and realised I was maintaining a pace much quicker than I'd run before, I still didn't feel too tired. I was breathing quite high up in my chest just because of how cold it was. This was definitely the coldest day of the test so far. And then we're coming up to a kilometre. I looked down at my watch to check the results, and in my mind I was celebrating finishing another one of these ridiculous 4 super shoes on 4-day challenges. I can't lie, I'm glad that's done and it ticked over, so you've got to stay tuned for the results, but I think that might be the fastest K I've done since retiring in 2016, 2017. So next up, let's take a look at all of the results. Okay, that's it, test done, thankfully. 4 different Nike super shoes tested on 4 different days, but do the times reflect how they felt? So let's go through them one at a time. So starting with the Vaporfly 2, the kilometre time for these was 2 minutes 51, so not too shabby. And thankfully, I don't think I've got too much slower from my marathon training. Moving on to the Vaporfly 3, and their time did reflect how they felt. They did feel slower, and they were slower. 2:56 for these. Then moving on to the Alphafly 2, which felt like a real sea change stepping up from the Vaporflys, but still quite noisy, but very fast. 2:47 for these. I actually surprised myself with that time. It's given how cold it's been recently when we've been testing them. I think in the summer I'd have gone even faster. And then finally onto these, the brand new, or relatively new, Alphafly 3. These have blown me away. 2 minutes 42, which is strange to say out loud because I genuinely don't think I've run a kilometre that fast on the road since my training as a professional way back in 2016, 2017. So these are pretty special, but they don't feel fast straight out of the box. As soon as I put them on, they felt a little bit strange with the cutaway heel and kind of rocking me back a little bit. But as soon as I ran at my fastest pace, they felt incredible. But I don't know how they would feel at slower paces, for example, for a mere mortal running a marathon compared to obviously Kiptum and Sifan Hassan, who are running at quite a significant pace. So how I would describe the Alphafly 3 is almost as a stealth super shoe because they don't look quite as nuts as the Alphafly 2. And when you put them on, they don't feel quite as bonkers either. But as soon as I started running fast, that's when you felt the technology, and that's when I realized how they could possibly have broken the men's world record. So which would I choose after today's test? Well, I'm trying to do some shorter distances in the coming months. So if I was going to be doing a 5K or a 10K, then I would definitely pick the Alphafly 3. I don't know whether I could run a full marathon in them though. Which do you think you would pick, or have you got another super shoe on your mind? You should definitely go and check out this video previously in much warmer weather where I tested 4 other super shoes.